Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us for this D23 Fund basic training. If you haven't seen me before, my name is Liz Schultz. I am the SFMS Senior Operations Analyst. I've been with DAS SFMS for about 7 years. I've been with the state for about 17. And I'd like to start us off today by explaining a little bit about what SFMS is and what we do. So SFMS is the statewide financial management services unit. We support and ensure accuracy and accountability in state government financial systems. So we provide services and controls in the management of the statewide financial management application, SFMA. And part of this work includes establishing and maintaining certain statewide profiles in the system, like the D23 Fund profile that we're going to talk about today. And you may hear SFMA, you may hear R-Stars. R-Stars is a specific module within SFMA, but for the purposes of this training, it's all the same thing. We're all talking about the same system, SFMA or R-Stars. So to get us started and to get a little bit of audience participation, I've told you a little bit about SFMS. I'd like to get to know a little bit about our audience today. So I have a couple of questions for attendees to get an idea of who's in the audience today. I'll ask each question, and if you want to type your response in the chat, we'll get a better idea of who's attending today. So the first question I have is, how many years have you been working in state government? You don't have to have the exact number. Has it been less than a year, between 1 to 5 years, more than 5 years? Okay. All right, so I can see we've got some responses. We've got a wide range. We've got some newer staff. We've got plenty of staff that have been with the state government for quite some time. Okay, helpful. We did intend this training to be a basic training. We are going to cover a lot of information about D23s. We also are planning to have an advanced D23 training next month. So this information, it's intended for newer staff, but it's always good to have a refresher. So we're hoping no matter how long you've been with state government, you will be getting some valuable information out of this training. My next question, question 2, is what is your current comfort level with the D23 Fund profile? I'm going to give you 3 options here. Low, you're brand new to D23 funds. Maybe you haven't even really heard of them much before. Medium, you feel pretty comfortable with them, the basics, or, high comfort level. You're really experienced. You're expecting this to be a refresher course for you. Okay, so I'm seeing some lows, some mediums, few highs. Okay, that looks good. Okay, and question 3, if you are hoping to get something specific out of this training, if there's topics you really want us to cover, if you could put that in the chat. I'm hoping we'll cover most of the topics today related to D23s, but we're going to use the information. If we don't cover it today, and I can see there's people that want to get more information about something that we didn't cover, we can make sure to incorporate that into our advanced training next month. So if you have ideas now, I'll ask again at the end of the training too. Just let us know so we can make sure we're covering the information that you want to know. Right. So looking at our agenda for today's training, really this goal of this training is for new SFMA users to be able to understand the basics to successfully submit D23 fund requests. We're going to go into some more detail on some of these things, but that's really our goal, is that after this training, if you have low familiarity with D23 funds, you'll feel a lot more comfortable with them and how to request them after this training. So we'll talk about what a D23 fund is. We'll go through some of the information that's on the D23 fund profile. We'll talk about how to request a D23 fund. We'll also talk about when and how to request a Treasury Fund. We have some guest presenters with us today from Oregon State Treasury that are going to present a few slides on Treasury accounts for you. So giving you a little bit more information on that piece of the process as it relates to D23 funds. We'll also talk a little bit about the process to close a Treasury Fund and a D23. So if you're in that situation, we'll have some more information on that process. And then we'll wrap up the day with the difference between a Treasury Fund and a cash fund, talking about how to request a cash fund and how to make changes to a D23 fund, what can be changed, how to request that. So as I mentioned, we've got a pretty full agenda. We do have a break planned during the training, and feel free to put questions in the chat. We will pause for questions to make sure we're getting you the information that you need. All right, so I'm going to start us off today with what is a D23 fund, and I'll go over what information is on the D23 screen as well. So a D23 fund is a really critical profile in our stars. It is the lowest level in the hierarchy for fund reporting. So there are profiles in SFMA and R-stars that agencies can make changes to themselves. The D23 fund is not one of those. It's centrally maintained. So agencies can request a new D23, but agency users can't actually make changes to that profile because it's very critical for several different groups. One thing the D23 fund does is it specifies the appropriated fund for budget tracking and reporting. So that makes sure all the information needed on the budget side for rolling up for budget information is appropriately accounted for in the system. It also specifies the gap fund that's used in financial statement reporting. It points to a specific Treasury fund as well to identify the associated Treasury account. That's useful for your cash reconciliations, tying your accounting information to a specific account back at Treasury. It also allows you to specify a cash fund. This is optional. It allows cash balances to be managed in R-stars across multiple D23 funds, so we'll talk more about that today. And there's also specific indicators on the D23 fund profile that control how information and transactions that were recorded on that D23 are summarized on different financial inquiry screens in R-stars. So we do get a lot of questions about what those indicators are and what the options are. So we'll talk about those today. So the reason the D23 fund is such a critical piece in the system is that every single transaction will have a D23 fund associated with it. And that's how all the information rolls up to that higher level for budget reporting, for financial reporting, for tracking and tying to Oregon State Treasury information. So when you're entering transactions in SFMA, most agency users aren't putting the actual D23 fund on each entry. Most agency users have that information on a PCA. So you're coding transactions to a specific PCA, which looks up the D23 fund. So every single transaction is going to have a specific D23 fund associated with it. So let's take a quick tour of some of the information that's on the D23 screen, explaining what some of these different fields are. Carlene Hancock is who in SFMS manages setting up these D23 profiles. She'll receive your requests. She's going to go into more information about requesting a D23, but let's start with a D23 that's already set up to see what information is on here. If you also want to take a look, if you've got an extra screen, you could bring up the D23 fund profile and follow through with maybe some of your own agency's D23 funds to get some more information. So this is an example that we're going to walk through of the Oregon Rainy Day Fund, a sample D23. So if we look on here, a couple of key fields are budgetary fields. So we've got the appropriated funds indicated here. We also have a budget indicator, the CC org level indicator. Now, if we look at the appropriated fund, our example uses 3,600. And to the right of 3,600 on the screen, there's a statement there that this must be in the D22 appropriated fund profile. So we can actually go to the D22 screen in R-Stars and get more information about what this appropriated fund is. So let's do that. We've got a screenshot here of the D22 screen. We typed in our appropriated fund 3600, and we can see this is other funds non-budgeted. And you can go to this screen and press enter and scroll through to see all the different appropriated funds that are available across the state. Now, the appropriated fund also has a CC org level indicator on it. So depending on which appropriated fund you're using determines the type of org level indicator that's needed on the D23 fund. Almost all of the appropriated funds use a CC org level indicator of 1, unless it's a general fund appropriation. General fund appropriations are tracked at a higher level because it's kind of one statewide bucket for the general fund. So those are the budgetary fields on the D23. If we go back to our example and take a look at some of the fields related to financial reporting, we have the GAAP fund. We also have the GASB 54 code as well. So the GAAP fund has that same statement to the right of must be in the D24 GAAP fund profile. So we can follow along and go to the D24 and enter in GAAP fund 0055 to get more information, and we can find out the title of that specific GAAP fund. This is what's going to be used in the ACFR, the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report that SARS prepares on behalf of the state. They're using this information to roll up that information to that higher level reporting. And if you have any questions, you can go to the D24, you can press enter, press F5 to scroll through and see all the different GAAP funds and titles. If you go to the Oregon Accounting Manual, we have a link there where you can see definitions for all of the different GAAP funds that are available in the state of Oregon. We also have the GASB 54 code. It's used to determine what general ledger any D23 fund nominal balances will be closed to at the end of the fiscal year. So after month 13, fiscal year end, there is a system job that is run to close out the general ledger. It will take any nominal balances, current year revenue, current year expenditures, current year transfers in, transfers out, and close it to the appropriate equity account, the fund balance GL for that D23 fund. So if there is a GASB 54 code on your D23, you can look it up on the D54 screen, enter the table ID GB54, put in the code, and you can see that different title. If you want to see all the different options, again, you can go to the Oregon Accounting Manual. It'll list all of the different types of GASB 54 codes with descriptions of each. And if you have any questions about that, your SARS analyst would be the best resource for questions on, if you're submitting a D23, what's the appropriate GASB 54 code. We will have SARS as a guest presenter in our advanced training, so we do intend to talk more about that in that future training. We also have Treasury and Cash fields, the Cash Fund and the Treasury Fund that are on the D23. As I mentioned earlier, Cash Fund is an optional field, and the Treasury Fund is what's going to tie to the OST Treasury account. So for the Treasury Fund, this is going to be associated with a specific account at Oregon State Treasury. Multiple D23 funds can be set up to use the same Treasury Fund. In our example, for the Oregon Rainy Day Fund, we're using the General Fund, 0401 for that. Legislation for that supports the new D23 fund may specify that a separate Treasury account is needed. That legislation will have specific language talking about funds need to be separate and distinct from the general fund. If we see that language in the legislation, it indicates a new Treasury account would be needed for that activity. So we'll talk more about that later, but this is where you can look up different Treasury funds across the state. Now the cash fund, our our example doesn't have one. It's an optional field. If you do have a D23 that lists a cash fund, you can look that up on the D73 screen. There'll be a cash fund. It'll show what Treasury Fund it relates to. So if you have multiple D23 funds that use the same Treasury Fund, an agency has an option to use a cash fund. With a cash fund, SFMA edits to see if there's enough cash is looking at that higher cash fund level. If you don't have a cash fund, SFMA is just making sure there's enough cash available within that specific fund. So we'll talk more about that later in the training as well. Finally, we have some summary indicators that I wanted to go over on the D23 screen. We get quite a few questions about what these are and what the options are. So let's talk about the appropriation, agency budget, and cash control indicators. So the appropriation indicator determines what activity level the D23 fund information is going to be summarized on the 62 screen. For the state of Oregon, it's always going to be a 1 on the D23 fund for activity to be summarized at the appropriated fund level on the 62 screen. So if you look at the 62 screen, it's always going to be summarizing at the appropriated fund level. We don't have a breakdown by individual D23 fund on the 62 screens. For the agency budget indicator, this determines how activity recording the D23 fund will be summarized on the 61 screen. So the 61 is the agency budget financial inquiry screen. We have some agencies that use this to monitor and track activity. Some agencies don't use it as much, so there is some variation. So the options available on your D23 requests, you could use an indicator of 0. That means there's no summarization happening on the 61 screen for that D23 fund. You could set it to 1 to have it summarized at the appropriated fund level, or you could set it to a 2 where it would summarize at the fund D23 level. So the example I have below is if it was summarized at the level 2 on the 61 screen, you could enter that D23 fund and see all the information summarized there. That's most often what we see as a level 2, but take a look at the D23 fund profiles for your agency because there is some variation on how agencies may set up their D23 funds for this. Finally, the cash control indicator determines the level of activity, how it will be summarized on the 63 screen. So there's a couple of different options how this information will be summarized, and it's primarily related to what appropriated fund is going to be used with this D23 and whether or not you've decided to use that optional cash fund. So any government-wide reporting D23 funds are going to have a cash control of 0. These funds are just used for financial reporting entries. They don't actually track cash. So the cash control is going to be 0 for anything that has an appropriated fund of 9998, which is the government-wide reporting fund. If it's a general fund appropriated fund, those typically begin with an 8. It's going to be an indicator of 1. Cash control is tracked at a higher level for general fund across the state. So you're going to use an indicator of 1 to track cash on the 63 screen at the appropriated fund level. If it's non-general fund, then you would either have the option of doing a cash control indicator of 2 or 3. 2 is used if there's no cash fund. So in that situation, when you're looking at the 63 screen, you're going to input the fund number, like I have shown in the screen print here, to see how much cash is available for your agency to spend within that specific fund. Now, if you have an optional cash fund, you'd use an indicator of 3. And then when you go to the 63 screen, you're going to enter that cash fund in and leave fund blank. So then it's going to be tracking the higher cash fund level. You might have multiple D23 funds that use that same cash fund, but then it gives you a little bit more flexibility in how you're managing cash within RSTARS. So that was kind of a whirlwind tour of the D23 screen. I'm going to pause and see if we've got questions. If you have any, feel free to type them in the chat. Again, we'll be going over some of the same information again in a little bit more detail, but I will pause here and see. Amber, do we have any questions?
It doesn't look like we have any questions yet. So I think we're good.
All right, thank you. All right, I am going to turn it over to our next presenter, Carlene Hancock, to take it from here.
Control. Oops, turn on the camera. So there you go. Good afternoon, and thank you for taking this training. I'm so excited to talk and speak about D23s today, especially in as much as most of us are in the bond D23 requesting phase. So yes, I am processing those as quickly as possible. How to request a D23 and how to be successful at it. That's even more information. So basically the D23 request form, we're going to review the process and the pitfalls for the agencies. We're going to try to catch all the mismatching elements on that request. We're also looking for any errors on the D23 requests that are discovered during the review that the agency will need to provide an updated D23 form for correcting these identified errors. This change was implemented 2 years ago. Remember, some of you will remember that if errors were identified, you could send me an email and up to 3 errors. You are allowed an email to correct those errors. Unfortunately, the policy, or fortunately, I think, the policy was changed. And now if there's an error identified, it's the form is sent back to the agency to correct the information on the form itself. So we have a nice clean form versus things that were messy with my crossouts and redos. So this was implemented a couple years ago. Okay, this is what a D23 request form looks like. If you notice, I did put the appropriated funds are found on the D22. Gap fund is found on the D24. State fund group, generally speaking, defaults to 999. But if you use any other state fund group, you will find those on the D39. We'll talk about a local fund indicator. You got 2 choices there of N or S. The GASB 54, like Liz said previously, is on the D54 screen with a keynote of GB 54. Table name. Cash fund is found on the D73. And cash control is also determined by the D22. Treasury fund is on the D53. The appropriation fund number is found on the 20 screen for the agencies. And then this is where the ALIS, or the Oregon legislature, HB's Senate bills can be found. And these should also be included not only in this space, but the legislation really should accompany the D23 request. It's faster for me to get them through review if you provide the legislation you want me to see. So let's get started. So D23 fund submission. The most current D23 and D73 Cash Fund are fillable forms. I understand that the D73 fillable form is not the friendliest of forms, but they are both found on the SFMS website under forms. You complete the forms. The newest form is found on the website. Older forms, I still am getting older forms. Please throw those away, people, because those are an automatic reject. So you get to start from the very beginning, putting all the information back in if I see them. I do look at the appropriate legislation and legal authority. We're looking primarily for spending authority, but the new legislature is in action right now. I understand some of you will probably be getting submitting new D23s because you have new projects and things you need to have these D23 forms for. So if you're starting a new one of those, it's brand new to you. We need the legislation on that too to start these. So it's not just funding, but it's the starting of those programs. Anyway, completed D73 form, if appropriate, can be sent at the same time that the D23 is. Now I'm going to stress this, not all agencies use cash funds. If your agency does not, then this is perfectly fine. Don't stress. This is just a form you don't need to fill out. This is just a field you do not need to complete. However, there are agencies that do consistently use a D73 form. Field, cash fund field. Once everything is completed, please send all requests to the D23 SFMS at das.org.gov email. This is a monitored email, and it's not just monitored by me. So Liz also monitors it. So it doesn't go into my personal email to die if I'm on vacation. So let's talk about the first thing I look at, which is there a legal legislative expenditure restrictions? Yes, no, easy question. Then where it's highlighted we give you a field. This is where I want the legal legislation referenced. And this is going to be House bills, Senate bills, e-board minutes, an ORS, and if it's the Oregon Constitution, by the way, I will not go out there and look for it. You have to provide that for me. The rest of it, I'm not wild about going out and looking for it, but I will. So be my best bud, provide the legal legislation. Oh, and we also have been, for COVID and ARPA funds, we have been accepting the federal HR bill for that. Fund number and title, you get to provide for me. You get to choose the fund number that you want to use. I do not personally want to assign those numbers. So for your agency, the agency assigns those numbers. And the title is assigned by the agency. I'd like it to closely go with the legislation or bond issuance. But really those are the agency calls. Those are for you to use. We do look at local fund indicators and Treasury funds. Treasury fund, we have to make sure that they are open and exist at Treasury and are available to use in R-Stars for the requesting agency. I have had in the past where other agency has put down a Treasury fund thinking it was theirs and it wasn't, it belonged to another agency. So be very careful when you're looking at and look at that D53 if you want to, and make sure that the agency is assigned to that Treasury fund. Does it appear to be appropriate? I look at it. So if you have a S here at the local fund indicator, I would expect to see a Treasury fund of 9999 or something starting with an 8. Shut that down. Or something starting with an 8, which is a suspense account that you've had previously a prior approval for check writing on. Anyway, I'm looking for a local fund indicator of N, which allows warrant writing, or S, which does not allow warrant writing. If like I said, if it's an S, it's a 999 or starts with an 8. I'm looking at the cash control, the cash fund and the Treasury Fund. If the cash control is equal to 0 through 2, the cash fund field should not be populated. If the cash control is equal to 3, the cash fund should be appropriately populated. So a lot of times what happens is I see cash fund field filled out, cash control is 2, and the Treasury Fund is filled out. So I will send that back to you and say, please clarify this information, because if it's a 2, there shouldn't be a cash fund. If there's a 3 and it's blank, you should have a cash fund. So just be aware that those 3 are kind of linked, and I have had problems in the past with them. Gap fund, G54 and G54 descriptions. If the gap fund is 4,000 or less, or within the range of 7,500, is there a gap fund indicator? Yes. If the GASB 54 indicator, if the GASB 54 indicator is there, then the GASB 54 description should be in place. These are the 3 fields that ultimately are reviewed by STARS analysts. So I don't really look at them for appropriateness. I look, if the gap fund is there, is it less than 4,000, or should there be, or is it greater than 4,000? If it's greater than 4,000, is it less than 7,500? The GASB indicator is there or not? If I see a mismatch, I'll send it back to you. I'm not indicating for appropriateness, but I will send it back saying, hey, there's a little mismatch here. You might want to talk to your STARS analyst. I look to make sure that there is, at least are in the ballpark for the GASB 54, but I really do leave that for the STARS analyst to analyze these 3 fields. State fund group, most common is 999, which equals Oregon default. If there is any other code, I will be checking on the D39. Does it exist in our STARS? Due to the pandemic and federal funds in the last, since 2020, 3 new state fund groups have been created, which is 2020, which is COVID-19 federal stimulus package. 21-24 is the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And then there was 3,000 for coronavirus response and relief. I haven't been seeing these probably in the last year, but it's always good to bring them up because I realize the funds, we're still spending the funds on that. Okay, I look at the appropriated fund as it is matched with the appropriation number. So we're looking at the appropriated fund is a required element on the D23 and must be filled in. The appropriation numbers, I want you to please include all your known appropriation numbers that will be used with this D23 through the PCA, the 26 screen. Appropriations are not on the D23 itself and are found on other profiles that may be used with that D23 fund. And if there is a mismatch there, you'll get errors, and we want to avoid errors as much as possible. SFMS does reviews for mismatches that may occur between these 2 elements when we're setting up. If you ever want us to do a secondary review with the appropriation to the D23, we can do that. It's not asked very often, but we can do it. Okay, new program and revenue funding. This is where the agency is able to put the story behind this request. And we love a good story as accountants. We are the why people. Why are we doing this? What do you need it for? What's the story? It can be very helpful in verifying appropriate legislation legislative authority for the request for the D23 funds. I have used the amount put in the revenue to match out legal legislation when I'm looking for a section in the legal legislation. So that is very important. Also, the story behind it is very important. I mean, we don't need an odyssey, but some explanation would be nice. Okay, the prepared by and the authorized by. Authorized by is required. This is required to be an accountant 3 or higher in your agency, and I do check. Should be physically signed or electronically signed. And when I mean electronically signed, you can choose to use an electronic signature, but please don't put security on the form, because I have to come through and I do put it in a packet, and I do make notes on every single one of these D23 requests. So if you put security on it that I can't go back in and put notes on in place, it causes issues. But you can certainly type your name on, and as long as the authorizing authority is on the email, I will accept it. Should be physically, most physical signatures aren't happening anymore because primarily most of us are working from home. And that's not realistic to have someone come into the office just to sign these off. If it's only a text box and a period signer must be included in the email string when sending this thing in, if it's being sent in by the person that prepared it. If the person who authorized it is sending it in, obviously they're included in the email. And then prepared by, agency number, and date. This all needs to be filled out. So these are required fields. Does anybody have any questions to how to successfully get your D23 through the review process, and what I'm and really, do you have any questions regarding what I'm reviewing and why? Doesn't look like it.
Yep, looks like we're doing really good. No questions so far.
Cool. Okay. When and how to request a D23. SFMS has started sending confirmation receipts of D23 requests through the D23 email box. I'm a bit behind in those, so when I'm sending them for final review, currently that's how I'm doing it. I apologize. I will get back to this normal process. I got caught with 1099s this last month, and I apologize profusely. Generally, there is a preliminary review done at that time once I receive it, and I look for any glaring errors, primarily missing legal legislation. Rejections can happen also at this time if the legal legislation is not fully signed through the governor's office, especially when it's new. The effective date of the legislation is a date more than 3 months in the future. This can happen also even if the governor has signed it. SFMS prefers not to hold requests longer than 1 month for any given reason. So if it's the agency's responsibility to monitor for governor's signature for this new, any new D23s coming through. And like I note, it's more common during this time of the legislative session. Although I do understand she has signed some already. So there is that. So SFMS will hold D23 requests awaiting new Treasury account setup at Oregon State Treasury, so long as the setup is within 1 month. So expected turnaround should be 5 days to review and approve a D23 request. Like I said, I will acknowledge that I am behind right now. Reasons it may take longer, however, is the governor has not signed the bill, but you've sent in the D23 request. SFMS has accepted, but placed on hold those D23 requests. As mentioned before, this is not This is more common at the end of a regular session, and the agency is still responsible for notifying an SFMS once the governor has signed. I try to monitor, but a lot of times I have so many that it's just not feasible. A new Treasury account has not been set up or crosswalked into R-Stars can also be a delay. Documentation is incomplete or questions have arisen during the review process, and agency has been notified and we are still waiting the response. Once a D23 has been entered into R-Stars, one of two emails will be sent to the agency. SFMS has completed review and the D23 has been entered into R-Stars. Here's the kicker, but SARS isn't finished with their review. So there may be requests for changes on these elements. Doesn't mean you can't use it, doesn't mean you can't go forward with putting indexes or PCAs or whatever you need to enter into the system and use it, because all of SARS reviews elements can be changed. Or you will receive a SFMS and SARS have completed their review and the D23 has been added to R-Stars without issue. So we will ask you to review the D23 screen to be sure that all the elements entered are as they should be and as how you would expect them to be. So no corrections have been made. I have been known occasionally to make a spelling mistake in the title. I know, I try not to, but it does occur. Please don't feel bad about sending a response back and saying, hey, can you change the title because it's wrong? And I'll get right on that to change it. Once the agency verifies the D23, it is ready to use and other profiles can be created. I like using the data entry guide. Liz likes the OMA or the Oregon Accounting Manual. Sometimes I think quick answers can be found on the R-Stars data entry guide. I don't know. So there you go. It's on the SFMS website. It's a great quick reference for additional basic information regarding D23 funds. It's chapter 5 under descriptive profiles, then D23 fund profiles. And if you go to the HTML link, it'll take you there immediately. It contains different additional information and options that may be helpful to the beginner or to the agency that doesn't request a lot of D23s regularly. For example, I always get confused on the G54 description requirements. So it has a nice little list of what the G54 indicators are and what they are looking for in that descriptive fields. It just kind of saves yourself a little. It's just quick. It's just a quick reference. Is there any questions that I can help you with regarding processes or? Okay. When to request a Treasury Fund? Oddly enough, how does an agency need to know when they need a Treasury Fund request or a new Treasury Fund? Similar to D23 Fund request, there needs to be legal legislation. I sense a trend. So there needs to be legislation behind the request. The legislation needs that we're looking for, that Liz already alluded to, was separate and distinct from the general fund. Legislation also will give you the title to your new Treasury Fund. Legislation may or may not direct where interest will be earned, and this can be very important. Generally, the legislation does not address where fees are assessed. Occasionally it does, but if it doesn't address it, then that's the agency's choice to where to address those fees, whether it's against the brand new fund itself, or if you want to direct it to another fund. An effective start date needs to be determined by the agency. It probably closely follows when the program is starting. And when does the agency expect the money to be available and received? this is probably more important to when the program starts, is when the monies will actually be flowing in, because as you know, fees are assessed, and if they are going against the fund itself, you don't want to say, yeah, start it 3 months before we expect to receive money, and then you're going to have fees with nothing to go against it, and you've got a negative balance that you're contending with. How does an agency request a new D23 fund, or I'm sorry, Treasury Fund? And is there a form? Currently, there is no form for a new Treasury Fund. That doesn't mean it's not coming in the future. But so agency needs to send an email request to that monitored email address, D23 SFMS at DAS Oregon. I want the title, the legal legislation, because I have to give that to Treasury for them to be able to open the fund. Interest earned, where is that interest? Is it in the legislation of it's going to be against itself or against another fund? If it is not addressed, if not addressed in the legislation, it's going to be sent someplace else. Fees paid itself or different Treasury Fund. Effective start date. When is the account going to be opened at Treasury, and when do you expect the monies to appear? What happens next is SFMS reviews the request and verifies the legislation. If we have questions or there is missing information, we'll touch back with the agency and request that information be clarified. SFMS in this case is responsible for assigning the numbers for the Treasury account, and then SFMS will send an email to the Treasury group requesting the new Treasury Fund setup. All contacts on the agency request will be included in the CC line, so you know that it has been requested and what fund number has been assigned. Always helpful. Then what is the timeline for requests? Oregon State Treasury has 5 days to review the request and open the Treasury Fund. It takes 1 day to crosswalk when a new Treasury Fund is opened from the Treasury system to RStars. SFMS, say that 5 times fast, receives an email confirmation from Oregon State Treasury as soon as the Treasury Fund is open. Then SFMS has 1 day to add the Treasury Fund profiles to not only the D53, but the LFCW to RStars. Normal turnaround is approximately 3 to 4 days. Process can take up to 7 to 8 days from the request to ready for inclusion on a D23. Any questions? Okay. We have our special guests from Treasury who are going to talk about account openings and closings.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you, first of all, to DAS for inviting us to join the presentation, the training today. We appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you. My name is Cora Parker. I'm the Director of Finance here at Treasury, responsible for all of the banking and cash management activities for the state. And with me, you'll see her also on the screen right now. She can give a wave. Sarah Kingsbury. Sarah is our Banking Operations Manager. We are your banker. We are the banking book of record for the state, and we work with you and other members of your agency and program teams to make sure that you have the right banking services to collect funds and distribute funds to all of your partners. That is distinct but very closely related to DAS in their role as the accounting book of record. So we work very closely with them, but again, our role is distinct. And I think both DAS and Treasury have really tried to do a better job of communicating what some of those distinctions are over the course of the last few years. And frankly, I think that's one of the reasons you see us sitting here in front of you today and what otherwise might have just been a DAS training. So if I can advance the slides here, we are going to talk to you today first about a couple of Treasury initiatives, really only raising them today because of the impact that they have had or will have on some of the specific topics we're otherwise bringing to you today. We're going to remind you about what we recommend be your first stop with Treasury, even as you're concurrently starting to work with Carlene and Liz and others at the Department of Administrative Services. Then Sarah is going to talk to you about what you are all here to really learn about, and that is about agency or receipted accounts, Treasury, or otherwise known as suspense accounts, and then of course, general fund accounts. We have tried to use both the naming conventions that Treasury uses for those accounts, as well as the naming conventions that DAS uses for those accounts, just to try and marry up the two and help provide some clarity. But again, if you ever have questions about those as you're moving along, those are things that Sarah, members of her team, and of course, Carlene and Liz and others at DAS can help you work through as well. And finally, we'll end with just some resources and some contact information that will be helpful to you. Just going to speed over this slide very quickly. Some of you who have been around for a while may be aware that we have just recently completed really almost a decade's worth of some modernization efforts in our partnerships with some of our banking partners and some of our internal account-related activities as well. We also have some upcoming modernization efforts, including we will be in the next couple of years working on some efforts related to what we refer to as core banking, but that really is the set of systems that include how your accounts are set up, managed, and reported here at Treasury. I raise that to you not to, get your raise your anxiousness level about what's forthcoming. I really raise it just to recognize the other housekeeping efforts that we're going to be working on in the next few months and really probably over the course of the next few years. We will be updating manuals, updating forms. You've seen some of that happening already. We really are looking to try and get everything updated, clarified, more, more easily sort of workable, fillable, and in a format that just really helps to answer your questions and helps, frankly, address things like the different naming conventions between our partners at DAS and here at Treasury. So I raise that just because you will be starting to see some changes as we work on those housekeeping efforts. What Sarah will talk to you about later, you will start to see some things either be better reflected to match what she's telling you today, or some slight tweaks to those things in the resource documents that we will ultimately point you to. And then finally, the last item that I will talk about before I turn it over to the real expert is just a reminder of where we recommend you start here at Treasury. So you see a list of potential reasons that you are opening, closing, or making changes to accounts. Again, that could be you've got a new agency, your agency has been opening, closing, or making changes to accounts. Again, that could be you've got a new agency, your agency has been abolished and you're working to consolidate programs elsewhere. There's a whole list of things that I've shown here. All of them really in some manner probably drive back to, just as Carlene referenced, to a legislative direction in some manner. And if not legislative direction, then at least some gubernatorial or agency head policy direction that is still under and over encompassing statutory direction. As those things are happening at your agency or to your agency, we recommend you work first with our customer solutions team. That team is going to be able to help you understand whether or not there are different kinds of services, banking services that you need, how those relate to the current and any changed account structures that you have in place, if there are any questions about legislative authority or any of the other things that, again, Carlene and Liz have mentioned. If you have that conversation first with our team, then by the time you get to working with Carlene to actually formally request accounts be opened at Treasury, it should be more or less smooth sailing. What Sarah is going to talk about with respect to timing is going to assume that all of those things are just running along hunky-dory and that there aren't any questions about them. If there are questions, then the timelines that she's mentioning are not going to stand because we will have to be going back and revisiting things. So again, we just recommend that either before or at least concurrently to reaching out with your partners at DAS, that you reach out and talk with Treasury again through the customer solutions team. All right, I'm gonna hand it over to Sarah, the real expert.
Thank you, Cora. Hello, everyone. I see lots of familiar names on the list here today as I work with many of you, and you also work with our banking team pretty much on a daily basis for some of you. As we go through this today, you're going to notice that I am following right behind Carlene, and I'm going to validate again some of the things that she had on her last slide there, especially around timing. So the first accounts that we'd like to talk about are our AGY receipted account openings. As Carlene already shared, that the agencies are going to work with DAS to confirm the statutory authority. What the agencies need is where those fees are going to be charged for the account, where interest will post, the effective date for the account opening, and any other unique considerations. Then DAS sends that request to Treasury to have that account opened. Cora, can you go to the next? Thank you. So we try very hard to have that account open within 5 banking days. Typically, we can do it a little faster, but at times, you know, we're serving a lot of agencies. So if we have a lot of requests coming in, it may take us those full 5 days to review everything and get the accounts open. We cannot open accounts within the last 5 banking days of the month. It is just too much on our plates right during that time, and just for accounting at the end of the month, no new accounts within the last 5 days. So make sure that you're getting your information to Carlene and Liz promptly so that they can get that to us in time to get those accounts open. Accounts need to be funded by the end of the month that they are opened. The monthly service fee for an account is $11 a month, and that is charged on the last business day of the month. If that account has not been funded, you will receive an overdraft fee of $30, and you will also have debit interest that could charge to the account. Now, if that account has the fees being paid out of a different account, the overdraft fee will transfer to that other account, but that debit interest will not transfer. So that will stay negative in the account. And so that if that account isn't funded for a couple months, then you can see it can kind of snowball, more fees being charged, more debit interest being charged to that account. If needed, and Carlene mentioned this, that she would like to only hold accounts for a month, we typically are happy to, within that month, get the account entered into the system, so it will crosswalk back over, and then we can open it on that first day of the next month if that's when the funds are going to be available to fund that account. Next slide, thank you. I just want to, one last thing on that last slide, I just, again, really want to stress the funding opening time of that account. So really, really think about that when you're sending in your requests and requesting what date you'd like that account to be open. All right, now we're going to talk about account closures. So just like opening, you will need to work with DAS to confirm any closure considerations. And we get that request from DAS to close that account. Again, we try not to do any account closures within the last 5 banking days of the month, and you'll understand that a little bit further in our next slide when we go talk about the timing considerations. And then the balance must be at 0. So how do we get the balance to 0? That's the next slide here. All right, so 2 considerations for account closure, and that is the pending interest that has been accrued in the account but not yet posted. All of our interest posts on the last banking day of the month, so if we're requesting an account closure mid-month, we need to get that calculated up to the day that we are going to post that for you, and we are doing that manually. Some options that you have with that interest in the account. The agency can request Treasury to transfer that to another account. The agency can request that we post that interest on a specified date, and then the agency then will be responsible for moving those funds. Or the third option, the agency can write off that interest, and we will need those instructions given to us along with the account closure. If accounts have any pending fees, that also must be addressed prior to closure, and that can include wire fees, ACH fees, previous overdraft fees, etc. We do waive the monthly statement fee if it for the month that we are closing that account. Next slide. So this is that timing consideration. So if we are going to be posting the interest, the accrued interest to the account, it will take potentially 5 days for that transaction to happen. So day 0, your agency is going to send a request to OST.banking, and that is if the option you are choosing is to have that interest posted to the account so that you can transfer it with the closing balance. And so that would be the first day would be the request sent to us. So then it starts day 1. And that is when we calculate what that interest is and we send it to the agency for validation that you agree with our calculations, and we will need a response back. We have to have that response back to us by 1 p.m. because we have to get that posted before our end of day process is run. Then day 2, that we would get that posted for the end of the day, then you would see that in your account after our nightly cycle runs and statements are posted, and that's around 4 p.m. every day. So day 2, the agency would receipt that interest. Day 3, then you would do that transfer of that balance of the account that includes that interest payment in it. And then day 4, once that account is at 0, you would request from DAS to have that account closed, and then we would get notification to close that account. One thing I didn't mention on the previous screen about the opening and the closing of accounts is that Carlene had mentioned that that the agencies are CC'd on the request emails. We reply to those emails, so you know when that account has been opened or closed also. All right, next slide. So that was about agency accounts, AGY. Now we're going to talk about TRS, which is our internal suspense. You refer to them as suspense accounts. Treasury refers to them as TRS accounts. And they are pretty much function the same way of setting up, except for the agency is not going through DAS to request this account. you're actually going to come to Treasury directly, and that request is going to include a formal written request signed by agency authorized signer, a completed C1 form, and then we also need the information on the statutory authority for the account. When Cora goes over the resources, there will be links to where you can find that request form and the what we need for that account. Our TRS accounts can have their own check writing authority, and I wanted to just clarify the timing around if you are requesting a check writing account, we potentially can get the account open within 5 days. But if we are truly going to have check writing for the agency to write their own checks, we have to build in the time for that process with US Bank. So that would be the agency getting their check stock, having all their printing set up for that check. Then we require samples of those checks, up to 5 of them, to be sent to us that we have to send on to US Bank for testing before we approve for those checks to be used. And there's also a setup time with US Bank on their back end systems for the shadow account structure that needs to happen to make all the magic work, how our accounts work with US Bank. All right, next screen, thank you. Closing a TRS account. Again, it will be the same timing of account closures, except for it has to be at a 0. So we're going to have to figure out what to do with that interest, and if there is any in there. And again, we avoid closing those within the last 5 banking days. But the agency sends that request directly to Treasury to close those. Pending interest, this is going to look very similar to before, but the agency is going to request the transfer to it. You can request the transfer to another account. You can post and receipt that interest, as we went through before, on the AGY account, or you can write off that interest. Again, the pending fees, that all needs to be taken into consideration, and we will reach out to get instruction from the agency on how you would like that handled. All right. General fund accounts, those don't come up very often, but we did want to have a slide in here just to address it. The agency will work with DAS to confirm the needs and authority. DAS will request the opening and closure at Treasury. This is typically for a new agency or agencies with a new general fund appropriation. All of the same timing considerations apply of our other account openings, and interest and fee considerations generally do not apply directly to agencies with a general fund account. All right, next slide. Okay, all right. I'm throwing it back over to Cora. Thank you all.
Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. So we have some links here to resources for you. The first one is the link to our cash management forms. Sarah mentioned those to you. She mentioned the C1 form, but there are some other forms that would be useful for you for a variety of purposes. Then our cash management policies, our cash management manual, and I sort of get quiet and a little embarrassed when I reference this one. It is very old in the way that it is written, its style and construction. It is still generally accurate, although some things are starting to just feel a little bit outdated. So this is definitely one of those things that you will see under construction in the next few months. We will be working to update it, both to reflect the changes and processes that we've had in our recent modernization efforts, and again, just to clarify some of the language across Treasury and our partners and the like, and just to make it feel more useful to all of you. And finally, if you're not already subscribed to our Inside the Vault newsletter, our state agency newsletter that we send out on mostly a monthly basis, I would suggest that you get onto that list and recommend that others, you encourage others within your teams to get onto that as well. There often is useful information there that could be helpful to you. At the very least, it has a full set of contact information at the end that will be helpful to many of the things that, that you and your teams work with Treasury on. And finally, just bringing again back to that contact component, we really do recommend that you start with the customer solutions team. Again, coordinate with them, coordinate with DAS. Make sure that before we start moving ahead, that you have an understanding of what timelines and expectations are, so that no one is caught by surprise with impacts of anything, that we really are all on the same page. And then once those things are worked out, again, if you're working directly with Treasury, so if you're requesting the opening of a TRS or suspense account, that would go to the banking operations team. If you are working on those things that work through DAS, you will note that the banking operations team is copied on those emails and is a part of the process. With that, we are at the end of our part of the presentation, and so I will look to see if there are any questions.
I don't see any questions in the chat. We can hang on for just a couple of minutes. I know you guys won't be here to the end of the presentation. So if anybody does have some questions for them, we can also, you have their contact information and can follow up with them. But all right, going once, going twice. Oh, somebody says it's a quiet group today. Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about D23 and Treasury Fund close form. This was a form that we rolled out last year. I think it's going well. I certainly like it. Standardization is good. You can find this form on the SFMS webpage under D23 Fund and Treasury Account Close Request. It is a Word document. It is a fillable Word document, and it is a working form. So when you send it to me, please keep it as a Word document. This form was like I said, was placed into service a year ago. The primary purpose of this form was basically ease of agency use, create a uniform request, because the requests were all over the place, and the number of it stops a lot of the back and forth emails between me and the agencies, and it creates a single source of a request for ease of processing by us. This was created as a fillable Word document, like I said, and should be emailed to the D23.sfms email address that I have given already a couple of times in this presentation. What the form looks like unfilled is a lot of click here and tap there's and enter. Like I said, it was created for ease of use. So we're looking for a request date, what your agency number is. Again, it has to be an agency 3 or higher that is requesting this closure. Treasury account number should be entered. List all active D23 funds to be closed. So if the Treasury account is to be closed, we need all of the D23 accounts. Now, that is not to be said that you want to close the D23 profile that is associated with the Treasury account that you want to remain open. So don't put the Treasury account down, because then I know it's just the D23. This is just a D23 close request. If there is an associated D73 fund to be closed as well, list it there. So I'm pretending I'm going to close something. So my agency it's today. It's agency 999. I've asked Liz to complete the form for me because she is my 3. And I want treasury account number 8888 closed, which is a suspense account with check writing authority. List all the associated D23s to be closed against it. I have 3 D23s just going against this suspense account. I've listed them all. There are no associated D73s in this scenario. So that's how the upper portion of this form is completed. Please note in the body of this close request form, there are important and closely aligned, and the information is important and closely aligns with our procedure. So it is recommended that eligible and associated D73 and D23 profiles should be closed when a Treasury account is closed or inactivated. This action will not cause any month 13 closure programs errors when they are run at the end of the year, and D23s with capital construction or appropriated funds of 30/20, 60/20, 80/20, do we have 40/20? Will not be closed in our start. So if it's a capital construction appropriated D23, you can list them. That's great. We need to look at them if you're closing the Treasury Fund, but we cannot close those D23s. It causes issues when we go through financial archives. Also, Treasury Fund 0401, which is General Fund, or 0539, which is Lottery, are statewide Treasury accounts and will not be closed. So you may have D23 funds that point to either of those two. The D23s can be closed, the Treasury funds cannot. So you must, next thing I check, and I do a query to ascertain this information, is it must have all real GL account balances at 0, with the only exception being the equity account that the expenses and revenue close to. That can have a balance, but you don't want balances in cash, you don't want balances in AR, you don't want any of those things. Then we don't want any outstanding warrants, which is GL accounts 1011 or 1111, respectively. If we have outstanding warrants on the D23, it cannot be closed. And frankly speaking, the Treasury account can't be closed either because there will be a balance there. Please submit the completed forms to, you guessed it, D23 SFMS at das.oregon.gov. I sense a trend of consistency. Then our responsibilities. We're going to run a query to make sure that all the D23s listed are either previously closed or are listed on the form to close for each requested Treasury Fund. Run another query to assure that all requested funds are eligible to be closed. So they make all of that information I put in the middle, or if further action is needed by the agency or SFMS. Sometimes if there's a general fund D23 closure, if it has a negative balance in cash, SFMS will need to fund it to a 0 balance and then close it. Or if it is a fund balance positive, the agency will need to draw it down to 0 before we can close it. Everything is a go. Then I send the request to Treasury for account closure. And then once the confirmation from Treasury is received, SFMS will close all the associated accounts as requested and is appropriate. And then I fill out the bottom of this form with, yes, I've confirmed that it's eligible to close. Or if I sent it to Treasury to close, it could be an NA there if it's general fund. or if you're not closing the Treasury Fund, you're just closing the D23. Date of accounting closure at OST, if it's appropriate, that's completed. And then date the profiles are closed in R-stars. So when is the work actually done? So that is the D23 Treasury Fund close request form. Are there any questions? Do you like the form? Do you hate this form? Do you want me to change the form? Is there something there that you need me to update that the agencies would like? I've not asked that question in a while. When you send the form to close D23s and Treasury accounts, do you also need to send the documentation that closed? No, you do not need to send anything, because I do all the, I see it and I say, oh, that's great. I have to do my queries anyway. So when I put my packet together, essentially what I'm sending my reviewer is, I've done the query to show that the account balances are zero. All of the balances are zero. Everything is appropriate to close. Along with your request form, the completed request form with all of your notes, all of my notes, and the Treasury email that's saying, yeah, it's now close to Treasury. So hopefully that answers that question. Anything else? Okay.
There is another question, Carlene. Is this the wrong place to ask what GASB 54 references are about? Can you just...
I think that's a Liz question.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Liz.
No problem. We did talk about the GASB 54 reference a little bit earlier on in the presentation when we walked through the D23 screen. There's also a field on the D23 request form for GASB 54. So GASB 54 is a specific accounting standard, is what it refers to make sure that when we run our general ledger close program at the end of each fiscal year, when we're zeroing out current year revenue, current year expenditures, current year transfers in and transfers out, that it closes to the right fund balance or equity GL. So we have more information in the Oregon Accounting Manual. If you look back in the prior slides, we give a reference where there's a definition for all of those different GASB 54 codes and what they mean. We're also, I would definitely, if you have more questions about that, you can reach out to your SARS analyst. I would encourage you to attend our advanced D23 training next month. We'll actually have SARS as a guest presenter for that. And they will be talking about that topic in more detail. So hopefully that answers that question.
Shameless plug, the advanced training is scheduled for May 21st. So just throwing it out there. We should have a link to the training soon. I think Amber and I are working towards that goal right now. So be on the lookout, but yes. May 21st, put it in your calendar if you don't already have the calendar. So there you go. I think it's your turn, Liz.
All right. Thank you, Carly. Yeah. And I do, just seeing a couple of questions that just came in the chat. One question, will the advanced training be recorded? If you won't be able to attend that date, yes, we will record that training. If you still want to register, we'll send you a list of the slides like we did with this training if you want to take a look at it, but we will be recording it and eventually posting it on our website so you can view that training at a later date if you're unable to attend. And then Carlene, we did have a comment as well that the form is great, clear and clean. So looks like it's working well. All right, so we've gone through quite a bit of information today. We have a few more topics that we're going to cover as well. I'm going to go through the difference between a Treasury Fund and a cash fund. I see one more question in the chat. Where will the recording be posted in the website? We post all of our trainings in the SFMS training material on the SFMS website. Amber, maybe if you have a chance, you could put a link to that general training in the chat. We will be posting that, and we post all of our training materials and recordings there. All right, so difference between a treasury fund and a cash fund. I want to talk about this a little bit more. We mentioned it earlier on. Terminology can be confusing. Treasury fund and cash fund kind of sound like the same thing, but they are different fields. So I want to take a moment to give you a little bit more information about these two fields. So a treasury fund is what crosswalks to a specific bank account at Oregon State Treasury. So, if you're working with Oregon State Treasury, they're talking about treasury accounts. That equates to a treasury fund in RStars. We do have a screen. This is not something you would normally have to look at as an agency. It's something Carlene and I are managing. But we do have a screen that crosswalks treasury funds in the system to the specific account number at Treasury. So going back to our example earlier this morning, we showed the general fund 0401. This is the screen where we're showing that Treasury Fund 0401 equates to account number 00401 at Treasury. And Treasury has a little bit different numbering convention than we do. We're usually just using that 4-digit Treasury fund. When you're working with Treasury, they usually have the agency number followed by 2 zeros, so that longer 5-digit agency number, a dash, and then they have an extra 0 before the Treasury fund number. So in our example, if we were trying to talk to Treasury about this specific general fund account for agency 107, it would be 10700-00401. So just give you some awareness. Sometimes when you're talking with different audiences, they might be needing a different number than just the 4-digit number that we use in SFMA. Now, the cash fund is a separate field, and it's optional. Not all D23s are going to have a cash fund. It's that D73 Cash Fund that we've talked about. It's really something internal to our system only. So if you're talking to Treasury, they don't use cash funds. They're not going to know what you're talking about for a cash fund. They're just thinking about the accounts. Cash funds are used within SFMA to control cash. So it can be useful for cash management if your agency has multiple D23 funds that use the exact same Treasury fund. You could do a cash fund on all of those, and that allows the information to be pooled in SFMA when determining whether your agency has enough cash to process a transaction. So on the 63 screen, if you have a cash fund, you can enter the cash fund to see the available cash balance for all D23s that use that same cash fund. So then, if you don't have enough recorded in cash in one D23 fund, but it uses a cash fund and another D23 fund has more cash, if both of those have the same cash fund, same account, you're not going to get an error when you try to record your transaction because there's enough within that cash fund in the SFMA system. So let us know if you have questions on that. Just wanted to point that out, that Treasury Fund and Cash Fund are two separate fields. Any questions on that? Okay. I am not seeing any, so I am going to pass it back to you, Carlene, to talk about how to request a D73 Cash Fund.
Okay. Now I'm going to walk through this. Sorry about that. I'm going to walk through this rather slowly, just for the sake that I get a lot of questions on this. And I have to, even old timers, I'm having to correct fields on this. So let's just look at it. A D73 cash fund is looks like a relatively simple form to complete, but there are multitudes of pitfalls on it. So just be aware that if you fall into one, you won't be the first person to have done so. Basically, like all of our forms, we have a prepared by person. Agency name, number, and phone number, authorized by, date. All of this needs to be completed. So I don't necessarily check that it's an accountant 3 on this. I probably should. Generally speaking, I've always seen the name come across the same. So I just, since the accountant 3s are reviewing them or higher, I assume that they are looking at these cash funds that you're requesting as well. It's probably a bad assumption, but there it is. The body of the form is, again, agency number. Then we want the fiscal year. Current year, fiscal year is 25, but we're swiftly moving into 2026. You assign the cash fund number, which is the 5-digit. You assign the name on the account, and it can be, at this point, anything. I'm not picky. The cash fund, of course, needs to be associated with the Treasury Fund, which is the 4-digit account number set up in R-Stars for the agency. Yes, I do check and double check, just like the D23, to make sure that the agency requesting is the owner of that account. Then you're going to see a linking only appropriation. If this is anything other than an 8, this is automatically crossed out because only federal funds linked to a general fund appropriation are appropriate and will be accepted by R-Stars. It'll actually error out in R-Stars. If you give me an other fund to link to for federal funds. So linking only is only used as an 8,000 number. Also, the kicker is, has it been approved by Sabres? They have a form, and they're the ones, Sabres will send the form down to me for the linking cash. So if you don't have approval by Sabres, linking cash is absolutely inappropriate to complete. An effective start date. Please, you can put an effective end date, but we definitely need an effective start date on this. Oh, I jumped ahead of myself. Wouldn't you know it? Anyway, the related appropriation, this will be blank for 99.999% of the requests. So, and this is for linking cash allotments only. I will not go into linking cash allotments necessarily. Just know that the agency has applied for and received permission by Sabres for linking allotments. So if you have not, they have not, there is not. So I hope that is clear, and I will quit getting linking appropriation numbers. Appropriation numbers are appropriate on D23 funds. If you don't have linking allotment, they are not appropriate on this form. Have I hit that hard enough? Is this a new cash fund? If so, please provide at least one associated D23 that will be associated with this linked cash fund. There can be multiple D23s associated with this because there can be multiple D23s associated with a single Treasury account. Doesn't necessarily have. It has to be a single one-to-one relationship. So one Treasury account to one D23 account is the very minimum standard. However, you can have multiple general fund accounts and have a single cash fund to, like Liz just said, for a cash organization on the 63 screen. So we want at least one associated D23, all of them if you have more. Is this a change to an existing cash fund? We occasionally have those. If it is, then change an existing D23 is no, and no always. Liz will talk later about what changes to an existing D23 form is appropriate and can be made. It's very limited and very locked down. And why is this change being made? So this isn't always completed, this isn't always needed, but just know if there's an change to an existing cash fund, you're going to be we're going to expect an explanation. It can change the cash fund. We cannot change the D23. So don't ask us to change a cash fund on a D23. That is not allowed. I'm so mean. Is cash fund linked? The default answer is no. And yes, but the agency must provide the SABR signed form granting linking cash permission. So that is the D73 form in a nutshell. It is a PDF, fillable PDF form currently on our SFMS website. I do understand, I am aware that this form is not the easiest to complete, not because it's hard to complete, just because it's the PDF makes it difficult to complete. So does anybody have any questions on a D73? And this is, like I said, this is that agency it's a choice for the agency to have a cash fund. It's not mandatory for an agency to have a cash fund. So please do not feel bad if your agency doesn't have cash funds. Any questions? We may get out of here early.
Yeah, I don't see any.
Woohoo! Okay, Liz.
Thank you, Carlene. Okay, so as mentioned by Carlene, one of the topics we have today, it's actually the last topic we have today, is what changes can be made to a D23 once it has been submitted. So we talked about how to request a new D23 fund. We talked about closing a D23 fund, what the process is for that. But we do want to cover changes as well. So there's only a limited number of fields that can be changed on an existing D23 fund. Similar to other profiles in the system, when you're making a change to an existing profile, it doesn't go back and update transactions that have already posted. So the only things we can change are, fields that are just looked up that aren't actually posted with the transaction. So it's really important as an agency, you want to get these D23 requests reviewed and accurate, because once it's been set up, there's not a lot of fields that we can actually change on them. So there are 4 fields that can be changed. The first is the fund title. We can update that. The title should always be consistent with what the fund's being used for. It should align with the legislation. But if there's a more clear title that you would like to see, something that better captures it, that is a field that we could change on an existing D23. So you would just send a request to Carlene to do that. The other 3 fields, the gap fund, the GASB 54 code, and the description could also be changed, but this requires approval from your SARS analyst to do that. These fields are used for financial reporting. SARS reviews these fields. They may dictate that a change is needed, so they may be driving this, or you may have done some analysis and want to see a change. Carlene will not actually make a change until we have SARS approval for that. So those are the other 3 fields that could potentially be changed on an existing D23. Now, if you wanted to change any other field on a D23 fund, unfortunately, you have to request a new D23 fund. So we can't, if you have the wrong appropriated fund, if you have the wrong Treasury Fund, if you meant to put a cash fund, but you didn't put it on there, we can't just go update that existing D23. You'll have to set up a new one. You can move balances from the old D23 to the new D23. Your SFMS analyst can help you if you need guidance on how to do that. And then you can inactivate the improper D23 fund. So just an important note, just to make sure that you're taking a look at this information carefully when you're requesting those D23s. Because once it's set up, there's very few things that we can actually change. So I'm going to pause and see if we have any questions on changes to D23 funds. And I'll open it up if there's any questions on any information that we covered today or any other questions we didn't cover related to D23s. I did mention, Carlene mentioned, we have that advanced training. We will be going over GAP funds, GASB 54. We'll have SARS here to provide more information on what they're looking at when they review D23 fund information in that advanced training. We'll also be going over linked cash and linked allotment. Carlene mentioned that with the D73. We'll go through more specific examples of that in our advanced training as well. So I do see a question in the chat. Can you not make any other changes even if the fund has never been used? We typically, once it's been set up, we don't want to make changes. In limited circumstances, if we can confirm it's never been used to record any transaction, we may be able to work with you to update it. We encourage you to kind of review it so we're not in that situation of having to verify, even if you recorded a transaction and backed it off, we don't want to make changes because it can cause problems with just system integrity and the audit trail in the system if we're making changes on an existing D23 fund. Carlene, do you have any more to add about that specific question?
The other thing is there is a review process. You can request it. We can say, oh, there's nothing's occurred. I can escalate it upwards. A lot of times the answer is no. So just be prepared for the no, because we can send it up. I typically ask Liz first if she thinks it's appropriate. I even have had a cause to ask our Alan, who is our systems accounting 3 person, because he's in charge of the financial archive, and if it's a profile that I know for a fact is kept open for financial archive purposes, I ask him if it's something that he would be worried about, and then it goes up to our joint manager, who then takes it above to his manager. So it goes up some levels for approval on changes on any other elements to be changed. So generally speaking, the answer is no. It's easier, kinder, and just if changes have to be made, just request to be closed down if it can be, and process a new one, like Liz said. But yeah, nothing is, I started in real estate, as accounting in real estate, and they said everything's written in stone, but there's an exception for every stone. But those exceptions are hard to come by. Wouldn't you say that's not untrue, Liz?
Yeah. So I think that's a good answer. Could we make changes to the fund never been used? Possibly, but it's unlikely. So, if you're in a situation like that, you can reach out and let us know. We can evaluate it. But generally speaking, even if it hasn't been used, we would recommend a new D23 fund be set up just to make sure it's not going to cause an issue.
Oh, we've got another one.
Okay.
If an agency has 2 D23 funds linked to the same Treasury account, and later on the agency decides to establish a cash fund linking that same Treasury account, can the agency make changes to the D23 funds and add the cash fund account? I would say no, but what's your assessment of that?
You're right on, Carlene. Unfortunately, we can't, cash account isn't one we can add later. If you ran into that situation, you'd have to set up new D23 funds with that cash fund. So be analyzing that when you're submitting it. You know, we have a lot of agencies, their standard is that if they're setting up a new account, they always set up a cash fund just so they have that flexibility in the future. If they have another D23 fund that's going to use that same treasury account, that they could have the pooled cash fund account. But unfortunately, it's not a field we can add later if that D23 funds has already been used and set up. Great question.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have plenty of time for questions. We're going to hang on. We don't have any more slides to go through, but I do want to recognize this is meant as a basic training. I know we went through a lot of information today. So if you're newer to state government and you're new to D23 funds, it might feel a lot. Reach out if you have questions. Our intent is for these slides to be a resource, a reference material that you can go back to. A lot of the times you may not know what questions you have until you're going through the process. So this will kind of walk you through the different forms, the different contacts of who you need to reach out if you do have questions. And hopefully if you've been around and been working with D23s, you've got some value out of this, that there was some refresher information or maybe learned a few things. Again, another call, if you have topics you want to make sure we cover in the advanced training, please, put it in the chat. You can feel free to email us later. We're putting together those slides now, and we want to make sure we're covering anything that you want to see covered or that you have questions on. So
Liz, can I add one thing? I also want to add one thing. I didn't mention this earlier. Liz and I are always happy to pre-review a D23 before you finalize it with your with the authorizing person from your agency, to go over anything you're nervous about, or if you think that it may need some tweaking. We are always available for that. Please give me another week to catch up a little, but other than that, we're here for you to be successful and to get through these D23s in the smoothest possible way. So I don't think I spoke out of turn on that, Liz, as far as being available for assessment. I don't know that going through your SFMS analyst for that is the best course. They don't necessarily are aware, I won't say no, but are aware what Amber is now of all of the elements that we're looking at. But they are wonderful sources, and I would reach out and touch if you have questions. But as far as pre-reviewing of those D23s, I'm more than happy to help.
Yep, that's definitely what we want you to take away too. Feel free to come with us if you have questions on anything specific. One more question from the chat. We recently closed our Treasury suspense account. Do we now shred all our unused checks? I would recommend reaching out to Treasury, the contact information that was provided by Cora. Reach out and ask what their advice on that is. Suspense accounts are something we in SFMS don't really deal with. And Sarah says, yes, please. So she's asking for those to be shredded. If you've got additional questions on that, please reach out to Sarah and she can give you more guidance on that. Okay. So I want to say thank you for everyone for attending. Amber did put a survey in the chat. If you could please fill that out, make sure we're providing valuable training, help make them better. Carlene and I will stay on the line. Our training isn't supposed to wrap up for a while. So if there's additional questions, we'll hang on the line and try to answer those for you. But I want to thank everybody for attending.